Hello, my fellow movie fans, and welcome to another show of Feast of Films Theatre, today starring Matthew Black and Ethan R. Hill. There, that's the intro.
Oh, yeah. Classic. Classic.
Hello, my fellow movie fans, and welcome to another episode of A Feast of Films. I'm Ethan R. Hill, and with me, as always, is...
Matt Black, what's going on, my fellow movie fans?
We are back for another episode after that lovely 3-hour conversation about Star Wars Episode 1.
Yeah, we are.
How are you feeling after talking about Episode 1 for a lot longer than I think either of us intended to?
Surprised and tired.
Right?
That was a lot of talking. I was surprised that we talked that much about it, and then I also felt very tired that we talked that much about it. It's like, okay, I think we just take it easy.
What I'm surprised about is how excited I am to watch Episode 2 now and actually talk about that. That's like a while still, but like I'm excited to watch Episode 2, and that hasn't been a thing for me for like a few years.
Fair enough. So, I don't know if I'm necessarily excited to watch Episode 2.
Well,
that's the one that I probably haven't watched the longest. Like, I definitely watched 1 more recently than 2. But, like, 2, I just have not very fond memories of. But it may change. It may be different. So, that'll be interesting to see what happens.
But also going back and, like, even listening to all the stuff that you could pull from Episode 1 that I never thought about, and all the things that you brought up where it's like, there's deep analysis into Episode 1, which I didn't think was going to be a thing. I'm like, okay, now what can we get from Episode 2? Like,
yeah, that's the thing.
Like, right? That's where I'm like, are we going to see new things that we didn't see before? Are we going to dig in as deep? I'm really curious about it, and I think that's what I'm mostly excited about. I'm just curious what the conversation's going to be, but that's not what we're talking about today.
No, we're not.
We're going to talk about other things that aren't related to that. We'll get to that in a bit. But do you want to start off with the question of the day, Matt?
So today's question of the day is actually based around some interesting movie news that's come out in the last, I guess it's been a week or so since it's come out, so it's not super recent, but, you know, it's recent in the generality of the history of mankind. So, recent news, and we're going to go with that. Today's question of the day is, recently, the Snyder Cut was released to actually be coming to HBO. The Justice League Snyder Cut. Let me set the stage. This has been a thing that's been going on for a long time. Ever since Justice League came out, people are like, release the Snyder Cut. It's been a hashtag that's been constantly happening for years. And no one ever thought it was actually going to be a thing. But it is a thing. It's been approved. And it's coming to HBO Max in 2021. So this is a really interesting development. And I know you're a fan of DC and superheroes as much as I am. So I'm excited to hear your thoughts on this as well.
What's the question?
What do you think?
Or is it just...
Oh, I guess the question is just your thoughts on it. The Snyder Cut has been a question of the day, but no question. The Snyder Cut's been released, Ethan. Or the Snyder Cut's been announced. It's going to be released. What do you think?
I actually have a lot of feelings about it. I'm very mixed on it. Because, like, on the one hand, I'm cool with the fact that Zack Snyder is going to get to see his vision realized because of everything that happened around that and why he had to leave the project, like his family tragedy and all that kind of stuff. That really sucks that's why he had to step away. That's an understatement, too, like, what he dealt with. But, like, the fact that he had to step away and didn't get to see his film finish the way he wanted to, I'm happy for him that he's going to get to see that. But, on the flip side of that, I'm unsure if it's going to be much different. I'm unsure how much of a difference it's actually going to make on whether or not it's good. But I think there's also going to be a lot of people waving a false flag, saying that it's better, saying that it's, oh, look at this amazing piece of art now, and it like if it's not going to be. And it's one of those things of, I think it's cool that it's happening, but I'd almost rather see the $30 million from that budget going towards a different project, rather than just seeing a re-release on a project that we already got that kind of didn't land the first time. And that's kind of where I am, like, from a director and filmmaker standpoint, I'm excited. But then also the flip side of that too is I'm just seeing post after post about, oh no, we got to release the director's cut of this one, and like release Suicide Squad but this way, and release this film this way, and it's like, no, I don't need a bunch of this. This is a very special circumstance, and stop saying that because the studio meddled in my film, it clearly is ruined, because there's a chance that it wasn't, but you're just really high on yourself and think that it was. The Zack Snyder situation was so specific to this project that he had no choice but to step away, and someone else came in, and the studio then ordered that person to change what happened. That's a very, very, very different situation than being able to see it from beginning to end, even with studio interference. So, like, that's why I'm more okay with this. It's just...
Right.
I think a lot of people are going to tout it to be better than what it actually is. So, but we'll see. I'll give it a chance. I'm not just going to dismiss it and be like, no, I refuse to see it, but I will give it a chance when it comes out. How about you? How do you feel about it? What do you think?
Yeah, I was never really a big supporter of Release the Snyder Cut. I was like, whatever. Okay, number one, I wasn't a fan of Justice League at all. I think it's the worst of the three that he made. And I'm actually a fan of Man of Steel. I think it's underrated. And that's another discussion for another video. Classic Feast of Film style. But yeah, I didn't really like Justice League. I thought it was this is not a very good movie at all.
Yeah.
Now the fact he's coming back to make it, is it going to be better? Is it not? I don't know. It could be worse. We have no clue what's going on here. He did not get this thing anywhere near finished. Like they said 30 million. It's going to be closer to like 70 plus. 30 million is what the article said, but then the actual head of HBO came out and was like, I wish it was going to cost me 30 million. Like this thing is nowhere near done as far as special effects and all the things that have to go into it. So it's actually going to be a way higher cost price than what that article said.
They'd almost be better off putting that 70 million towards just like, you know, eat what the reviews said and all that kind of stuff and just make a sequel. Just make a second Justice League film, make it a bit better, hopefully, but like just like I don't know. I think that would make more sense to me than spending, because like 70 million, you could make a lot of movies for that. You really could.
Yeah.
Like
you could. And I guess my point is really, I'm not the biggest fan of Justice League, but I'm excited to see what's going to happen. I think it's a really smart business move as far as HBO Max is concerned. HBO Plus? HBO Max.
Yeah.
HBO Max. As far as HBO Max is concerned, it's a brilliant move because people have been calling for this for a year. So already you have a dedicated fan base in there. And now you have something to draw them in. So it's a great way to get subscribers, at least for the start. Maybe they'll leave after that. I don't know. But I think it's a pretty smart business move. What I'm honestly interested in most is how they're actually going to pull it off. Like how they've been dealing behind the scenes with contracts and those different types of things. Because this isn't just, like, this is something special.
Yeah.
Right? This isn't just like a bonus feature on a thing. People have made the Justice League, the actors, the directors, the writers. People were made, the Justice League has been made. People have been paid for it. And now they got this whole new entity of the Justice League being created. What's the contracts look like? What's payment look like? Because you kind of have to figure, do you have to pay these people all over again? What does that look like? So it's really actually interesting because they've already been paid for their work to make one movie and that book was closed. Now it's getting reopened and they're making a totally different movie with the same title. So I'm just kind of interested in how that looks from a business perspective and if we'll actually get to hear any more about that.
Well, I'm curious.
That would be interesting to me.
A couple positives that I think that might come out of this is I'd love if this rejuvenated studio interest in Henry Cavill playing Superman, because I think he was cast really well, but I think he wasn't ever given a chance to actually be Superman. I think he was given some mediocre scripts that weren't great, and that kind of like it didn't sit well with me because he never did get to be, you know, I'm happy Superman. He was always like, I'm angry and sad. Yeah. I'm basically Batman, but not in a bat suit. Like it just didn't land for me. And then possibly there's rumors to it, but I don't. Anything I see on the internet, I don't really take much with a grain. I take it all with a grain of salt. But it's Ben Affleck, apparently the studios want him to come back and do his Batman film again, like come and do a Batman film as well. So there's people being like, ooh, we could get 2 Batmans, and I'm like, okay, I'm okay with that, but at the same time, like, I doubt that's gonna happen.
Why? yeah, for sure.
Like, so I'm curious about that. I'm curious about the direction it's gonna go. I'm really torn on it, man. I'm not like stoked for it, but I'm not interested. I'm there. I'm just kind of like,
I'm honestly more interested in it. Like, I didn't like Justice League, so seeing something else, especially even if it's a little bit better, I'll be like, hey, cool, time well spent. If it's worse, then I guess it's worse, right? What are you gonna do? But it has the potential to be better. But also saying Zack Snyder is still the guy who made Batman v Superman, a movie I was not a big fan of either, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like I'm saying, wow, whatever Zack does, I'm sure it's going to be perfect and great. Like, this movie may also have had a ton of flaws. I didn't like Justice League as it was. It was so rushed. It was not well put together. The whole Henry Cavill mustache thing was horrendous. To watch that was horrendous and honestly drove me nuts. And you'd think it's such a little thing and dumb, but it looked so bad. Oh, yeah. It looked like he got stung by a bee, like in the face. And they're like, we're just going to record it anyway. Like, it didn't look natural. It was terrible.
Why wouldn't they just offer...
I saw a deep...
These are big... Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, like, yeah, you're right. These are big Hollywood studios. They should be able to do a good damn job at this. I saw a deep fake on YouTube where they put Henry Cavill's face on Superman, which is, what it is. And it looked better than whatever they did with the mustache thing. It looked actually right. And I was like, okay, so 100%. We can do that on YouTube. How could we not figure out a way to make this happen and look better? Because it was so distracting. It honestly took away from the film because it was so bad. But no, I'm excited to see what Zack does. I don't know, maybe excited. Interested is probably the better word. I'm interested to see what he does with it. Yeah. Whether it's going to be better or not, I don't know. And don't really care. Because I didn't like Justice League as it was, so maybe I'll like this one better. But it's not like it's going to be canon. And like, now this is the Justice League. Like, it's just, this is Snyder's cut. This is the one that's actually canon. And the bad Justice League, I'm calling it the bad one. Joss Whedon's Justice League already came out and already affected everything to come after that. So just by putting this out is not going to change the course of history, right? Like, it's not going to fix up the relationship between Ben Affleck and, his whole relationship with Batman. It's not going to change the Henry Cavill stuff. Henry Cavill's also, I've also seen rumors and stuff already that they're talking about having Henry Cavill come back in other DC movies as Superman. And possibly a J.J. Abrams Superman coming. Like, that's going to happen.
That would be cool.
With Henry Cavill. So, those are rumors. And I'd love to see Henry Cavill back. Because I thought he was just, again, a great pick.
He was good.
And like you said, he never got to be, like, the Superman that we all know. I liked Man of Steel. But he still wasn't the Superman. Like, he was just a human, right? He wasn't the god and the being the icon of justice and freedom and peace and apple pie and America.
I have opinions on his Superman, but I'll save my opinions on his Superman for like a whole other thing because there's a lot that I think I have too many opinions. That's my
how
problem.
You feel.
I have a couple.
I mean, exactly. Like, this movie isn't going to change anything that's already happened, so it's just kind of like a little bonus thing to see what could have been, and whether that will make it better or not. No, it actually might make things more sour. Like, oh, this is the movie we could have had, and now things would have changed differently. So maybe it's sour, that idea. But again, it's just I wasn't a fan of Justice League, so I have nothing to lose here. Like, I just have nothing to lose. I'm interested to see what he's gonna do, but it isn't gonna change anything at the end of the day. But it will be interesting to see.
I genuinely think they could change the continuity if they wanted to, and like as long as it doesn't affect Wonder Woman or Shazam or Aquaman drastically, I think they could still technically have this be the in continuity Justice League because it's at the end of the day it's their properties. They can do whatever they want.
True. True. I mean, that'd be a pretty big slap to the face though to like Joss Whedon.
So I have a couple of questions with that actually.
Yes.
First off, the thing that baffles my mind, because they're big movie studios. They have makeup effects people. Why wouldn't you offer Paramount? It's like, hey, can we shave his mustache, but we will hire a makeup person specifically to recreate his beard exactly. Because there are people who can do that. There are professionals who could do that. Why wouldn't you make that offer?
I think they did offer something like that. I think they did offer, because they were in talks about getting him to shave his mustache. But Paramount's like, no, we need the mustache for our movie. Which is fair, because he's on set filming their movie. These were unplanned reshoots, right? So I don't blame Paramount. Like, a studio has to look after their property. Why have 100%. Something subpar when you can have the real thing? Like, it's these guys' fault that they have all these problems. You guys deal with it. My question isn't why didn't they get Paramount to let them shave. My question is, why didn't you just do a better job on the special effects? Because if we can make Thanos look real, why can't we get rid of his mustache?
Couldn't they have postponed the film by like 3 months? Studios push things back.
That was another big thing that was happening at the time, because I think AT&T was buying Warner Brothers or something like that. And Walter Hamada, there's an article that came out, whether it was true or not, I don't think we actually know. But there's an article that came out where Walter Hamada pushed forward the release of Justice League. They wanted to delay it, obviously, so they could do a better job. He pushed it forward so that he could still get his bonus before AT&T bought Warner Brothers.
Oh, that's sketchy, man. I don't like that.
And that's an article that came out. Now we can't say like, oh yeah, that's absolutely true what would happen, or that's absolutely true what happened. But that's what it looks like what happened. And honestly, it makes sense, because why would any movie studio, after you invested so much money into it, just be like, no, we're just gonna push it out anyway, however it is? Like, why wouldn't you just, let's put the little extra more time and money into it, make it better, so it can be better, well received, and not so rushed. But again, this article says Walter Hamada denied that, pushed it forward so he could receive his bonus before AT&T ended up purchasing Warner Brothers, and he would have been out. He's out right now, like he's not in there anymore. But that's what it looks like. What happened there? It was more of a money grab than it was concern about the actual quality of the film.
So the other thing too, it bugs me, because I feel like Joss Whedon gets an unprecedented amount of hate for what happened to Justice League. I don't think it's Joss Whedon's fault. It's not his fault, personally. No. So my question to you, do you think that if Joss Whedon was seeing the film from beginning to end, so like from script all the way to editing, like that entire thing, if it was just his vision or just Zack Snyder's vision, do you think they would have been better films?
Absolutely. Hands down, man. I absolutely think that. And that's why I think maybe even the Snyder Cut may be a better film, because it will be Zack's vision from beginning to end. Yeah. Or at least more cohesive, right? Hopefully. Joss Whedon was put in this impossible position. Zack Snyder, with the loss of his, is it his son or his daughter?
His daughter.
His daughter, right? Now, that is what a lot of people assume is kind of like the scapegoat reason, but we all know Warner Brothers were trying to push him out before that. After the release of Batman v Superman, they're like, damn, we got to get rid of this guy. But he was already halfway through filming, or working on Justice League. Yeah. So to get him out was tricky. But then with that situation, I think it just kind of, allowed them to push him out a little further. And they kind of used that reason. I think obviously it clearly was that reason, but I think it was also a convenient, excuse or a way to push him out. But then Joss Whedon had to come in, pick up these pieces from the other director,
and then do reshoots.
Didn't say keep making the same movie. They said completely change the movie. You know what I mean? And do reshoots and fit in these things that weren't part of the cohesive idea. That's where you got this movie that was so mixed matched. Some were from old Zack Snyder stuff, some was Joss Whedon stuff, and he just put them together. So that's where you're really having that issue there. If either one of them would have been able to take it from beginning to end, I think you would have had better movies. Especially, I trust Zack Snyder. I think he's made great movies before. Visually, his narratives aren't always the strongest. Visually, he makes pretty cool movies. But Joss Whedon, he made the first Avengers. He made Age of Ultron. And Age of Ultron also is a little bit underrated as it is too. It's not the worst movie. It's not as good as the original, but it's not the worst. And that maybe even just could have been the original Avengers magic. First time seeing all the superheroes together, right? You can't beat that. The second
Yeah.
one's never going to be able to do that because
But-
you've already done it, right?
I think they did though. Like I love Age of Ultron.
Yeah, it's still a good movie. I think it gets more like
gets
it's
a lot
not
of
as
hate.
highly regarded.
Yeah.
Yeah, it gets more hate than it deserves because it was still a good movie. But I'm just saying, it didn't capture that magic because you only had one chance to capture the magic, right? Like from the first Avengers, because we didn't have movies like that before.
From what I understand with Age of Ultron, that's the one that made Joss Whedon leave Marvel because he was getting less and less creative say in it because that's when they were starting to go for that cohesive like, okay, we want all our movies to feel like this. And that's where
A
if
little
you
bit
look
more
at
connected, yeah.
if you look at Age of Ultron to I guess more recently, like as soon as Guardians of the Galaxy really had their big impact and then Thor Ragnarok had its big impact, all the Marvel films kind of felt the exact same from Age of Ultron on, and that's when it basically Marvel kind of stepped in more of a, I'm not saying they made the movies bad, but they made the movies boring, I guess, or just kind of the like they weren't boring, but like
Their idea could work, their concept could work. Now they had to bring in cohesion to it a little bit more, right? Because they had this idea of individual films and then coming together, but they didn't know that would work until Avengers actually came out and showed them that it would work.
but then the problem is the movies became too cohesive. Like there's a thing, there wasn't individualism between each movie, and there's little bits here and there, but overall a lot of them are kind of feel the same. But then I guess Black Panther 2 felt very different, and that honestly, like out of all the movies, I love the Guardians. They're my favorite ones. I think the one that stands the best alone without anything is actually Black Panther, because you don't need to watch Civil War to get what's going on. They explain that really well.
Yeah.
It's got a good, tight, cohesive story that fits its own universe, and you don't need to rely on all the other ones. Like there's nothing to do with, because there's no Infinity Stone in it, right?
No.
Like there's literally nothing. Like at least with Guardians, you still have it tied to the Infinity War. Like Black Panther, no, it's such its own thing that to me, as like looking just films on their own, that one is the strongest, I feel. And that's just my feeling on it, but it's not my
Definitely
favorite.
as an individual, yeah.
Yeah.
And not connected to anything else. I think like Winter Soldier was great too, like in its own right, like as an individual movie, like just the whole Black Ops political thriller, like just the style of that movie was very different.
See, and I miss the
the
campiness
rest.
of like I love the pulpiness and the campiness of the first Avenger. Like
Of the first Captain America.
I love
Yeah.
it so much, man. It's just it's so good. And like we have that debate in our house on a regular basis because my roommate loves Winter Soldier, and I'm like, it's okay. It's not as good as the first one, and like, but like honestly, like we like them both. Like it's, but I think I like how we
probably Captain America. I like how we're talking. Yeah, DC.
we went
now
from
we're talking
DC
about
now to Marvel.
Just talking about one guy who is in between both. I'd say Captain America has the strongest trilogy easily overall out of all the movies. Right, Thor's movies for sure were not always the strongest. First one was good, third one was good, second one was pretty weak. Iron Man movies overall not the strongest, right? Just because he was kind of that initial first guy stepping out, right? Iron Man 1 was good. I still liked Iron Man 2. Iron Man 3 is questionable. Like they were good movies, but Captain America for sure has had the strongest trilogy. If you just watched it as 3 movies, his has for sure been the most consistently strong 3 movies out of all those guys. Now we'll see once the others finish their trilogy, because Guardians would be another one that would be in that. If the third one's really good.
I'm hoping. The only problem I have with Civil War though is that it shouldn't have been a Cap movie. It should have just been an Avengers movie. Like I don't think that they needed to make that, like, because the thing is the story is not just about Cap. It's also about Iron Man, right? It's also about all of them. It affected everybody. So to me, to make it Captain America Civil War, it just kind of felt like it should have been an Avengers film because it explored.
Well, I think they weren't Captain America 3 wasn't originally Civil War. I think it was just they had the idea, and then they honestly I think just put that one together very quickly, like with contracts and everything else, because they had to expand like Robert Downey Jr.'s contract to fit it in, and it was just I think it was like one of those things that's like lightning in a bottle, man. And it just came together.
I do have a problem with some of the superhero movies like that where they're latching on to the titles. Like they're latching on to popular titles in comic books, and that's why we're going to make it a movie now. That's the whole reason why like most of like the interpretations that people love for Batman are the Dark Knight Returns and Killing Joke. They're not necessarily the strongest Batman stories, but everyone keeps gravitating them because they're recognizable names. And it's the same thing with Civil War. And it's like, okay, but I'd rather just have a good original story rather than just taking a title of something that I know and then you make a mediocre version of that, right?
No, I don't know if it's a mediocre version. Like,
to me,
obviously you're never going to capture the grandiose of the comic book arc, but I think using the name is fine. I think, like, they have certain elements that are similar, but really it is its own kind of original story that fits within their universe. So I don't have a problem with it.
I feel like the story at the core of what Civil War is about should have still been about that registration, right? Should have been about signing their rights away. Whereas then it turned quickly from, like, signing our rights away to, like, no, it's about Bucky. And it's like, okay, but, like, that could have been its own Cap movie. And then to the side of it, like, in its own movie could have been the whole thing about, like, okay, but us as superheroes, we need to have more responsibility. And that's kind of where I think, like, I feel like I wanted, like, an extra movie in that saga rather than cramming two very different stories into the same one. I mean, that's
types into one.
I think that's my complaint about most things, though, is like you're cramming. Like, it's like I want more of this. I think I said the same thing with Star Wars. I'm like, I wanted an extra film. I wanted that. Like, I always feel like if you there's always an opportunity for some of these stories. Like, I guess I can't say all and then some. That's just weird. But like, I think there's opportunity for a lot of these stories to be stretched out into a couple different movies rather than just shoving a bunch of ideas into one. And I think but it's the same thing with, well, it's Batman v Superman. Why did you throw the death of Superman into the end of Batman v Superman? That didn't make any sense.
Oh, there's so many things that happened in that movie that was like, dude, that was clearly like a rushed trying to catch up to Marvel situation. You know 100%. What I mean? Like,
oh, yeah.
Like, it was like that you could have had, like, I just think it would have played better. And you don't necessarily have to have this. Like, there's no rules that you have to do it. But it would have been a little bit better to get another Superman movie, a Batman movie, and then at least have the two fight. Like, the thing is, between Civil War, because both of those came out the same year, right?
Yeah. Civil War and Batman v Superman was the exact same time.
Yeah. We knew these characters. We knew the relationships. They were a lot more deeper, a lot more established, and you cared about the characters. That was not the same for Batman v Superman, because a lot of people, number one, didn't like Superman still. I did. I liked him, but he still wasn't easy to connect with, and you barely saw him. Batman was new on the scene,
but he wasn't, though.
He was
like,
kind
that's
of an a-hole.
One of my favorite.
But the character Ben Affleck's Batman.
Oh yeah,
that rendition of Batman, right?
I thought you meant like in the movie.
No one's ever heard of Batman. No, like the rendition of Batman, and then there was no fighting. It was all weird politics. It was all like weird things that happened in stories, and then when the fights did happen, they weren't that impressive at the end of the day. And then they killed Superman at the end. It was like there was just a lot of things that didn't quite add up.
One of my least favorite things about that movie, about Batman v Superman, is how, like, Clark has apparently never heard of Batman in his entire life. Because he's like, Perry, this Batman guy, we gotta look into him. And Perry White's like, Batman's old news, no one cares. Just leave it alone. And he's like, no, but, like, we gotta do something about this Batman guy that I've clearly never heard about. Who is he? And no, Clark, we don't care. No one cares. Just leave it alone. But Perry, and it's like, how do you go through your entire life living across the bay from Gotham and being like, well, I guess he didn't spend his entire life there, but he's been there for a while.
Yeah.
He's also Superman. Like, you're telling me that you've never once, like, heard anyone mention Batman? And, like, because
Batman.
And he's been around for how long? Because I want to say they said he's been around for 8
Well, he's
years
at the end. Like, he ended his career. Like, he's done.
And then he came back.
Like, they took it very much from, like, the Dark Knight Returns idea of Batman, right? So, like, he's already been Batman. And it's strange just even how the cops react to Batman, too.
Oh my gosh, Batman!
Like, they're like, and I'm like, dude, what? Okay, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, there's just a lot of things that don't work in that movie. So that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying Justice League would have been any better, but back to Justice League. But it'll be interesting to see what he puts together.
To bring it back to the Zack Snyder question.
Yeah. All the way around. Full circle, baby. Full circle.
I like how you led in with, like, this will be a simple question of the day. This won't get too deep or introspective, and then
Well, it didn't get introspective, but I mean, there's a lot of
Matt,
a lot of different layers to it.
How do you feel
And
that
we're both like nerds, so whatever. Like it's gonna happen.
how do you
It's
feel like
gonna happen.
Superman's journey relates to you? And go.
Okay, let's keep going here, man. We got so
All
off
right.
track.
So, oh man, no,
I don't know how we got from one end to the other, to be honest, and all the way back around, but we did it somehow. It's probably way longer than it should have been.
But that was honestly, man, that was a really good question of the day, and I'm glad I kind of knew that it was coming because, like, yeah, I had opinions on it. I've been thinking about it for a while. I've shared opinions.
Well, again, dude, I just like how we're like, this isn't gonna be very long, and then every time we say that, we just stop saying it because it's like jinxing it. We're like, this isn't gonna be long.
Yeah,
3 hours later. Well, that was a great question of the day.
As soon as we stop saying it,
blah,
we're gonna have a
blah.
10-minute video and be like, well, that wasn't that was too short. But
Yeah, exactly.
so
Let's keep rolling though.
so yeah, that being said, we're gonna talk about some topics that me and Matt personally have some experience with, being as we were born in the year of 1991, and that's what we're gonna talk
Best
about.
year ever.
Yeah, exactly. Good,
I don't
great
know.
year.
I have no grounds to put that on, but I'm just saying.
Metallica's Black album, I believe, came out that year. Depends on how you feel about that album, but I know a lot of people love it.
Silence of the Lambs.
Silence of the Lambs, Terminator 2, Beauty and the Beast, Thelma and Louise, Fried Green Tomatoes, Hook, Point Break, Backdraft, 50 Goes West.
Oh,
A
man,
lot
I
of things.
love Backdraft. Oh
I
my
didn't
God,
see
I forgot
that.
existed till you just said that.
I didn't see it until like last year, man, and it's so good.
Oh, I watched it as a kid a lot.
I was not allowed because of a lot of cursing. But like, so
That
anyway,
tracks.
to bring it back, we're not just going to talk about 1991 though. We're going to talk about the 90s as a decade, because I was talking with a friend of mine and we were discussing how the 90s is really, really weird in the fact that everyone just kind of breaks it down to this really campy, silly time and really just forgets about like a lot of really classic, great movies, as we like just listed off with just 1991 that came out. And a lot of the 90s kind of gets overlooked, in my opinion, just because it's not the 80s and it's not that classic time, and it was just a really weird time for movies where you could have things that were like really, really serious, like Schindler's List, and then right next to that, same director, same year, Jurassic Park. Like,
Yeah.
like the fact that you have those two movies coming out the exact same time is super weird, and I honestly think could only have happened during the 90s. I don't think that could have happened in the 80s or the 2000s. I think the 90s, because tonally, it's just such a weird time. It just didn't know what it wanted to be for an entire decade.
It was kind of, it was honestly like the teenage years of human history. Not human history, but like, because you have very specific styles and looks for every decade. I find the 1900s in general very strange, because before that, human life didn't change a whole lot. You know what I mean? Like, they used swords and bow and arrows for like hundreds, thousands of years or whatever. And then in the 90s, like transformation and changes, or not in the 90s, but the 1900s, things changed so fast. Like the 20th century, I guess we could say. But I always find it so ironic.
The technology boom.
Yeah, and like just the styles and the changes in society and cultures, it's just incredible. Like when you look at something from the 70s, you can tell it's distinctly the 70s. You can tell distinctly the 80s or the 50s or the 40s. 90s though is like this weird transformation between 1900s and the year 2000. It's like just before, the year 2000 was, we get what 2000 is and forward. But yeah, 90s was kind of like this weird transformation as we were going from one century, the end of one century, into another. But it's an interesting decade. Like you said, there's a lot of weird things that happen, especially on like TV, I guess. But there's some really, really great films that came out in that decade for sure.
Well, if you look at where a lot of the campiness comes down to, it is a lot of the 90s. A lot of 90s TV was really, 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 really campy. And then the movies were a little bit more serious. But then eventually that started to kind of bleed in, especially by the late 90s. That campiness started bleeding into more modern movies. And I think also a part of that too, and it's a pattern I've noticed and I've talked about with my roommate and some other friends as well, is that the periods of movies almost go by fives as opposed to like the round, like it's not 1960 to 1970, but it's like 1965 to 1975. That is where they kind of feel like they're the same. They kind of have the same kind of
Oh, right. I get what you're saying.
So even like,
I get what you're saying.
if you look at like 85 to 95, those all kind of feel like they're part of the same decade. And then 95 to, I'd say 2000, just 2001, because like media definitely changed after 2001 and 2002. Like that was a massive shift in how media was. But like, if you look at the beginning half of the 90s, there's such a tonal difference to the second half. I mean, actually, a really good example to use to narrate that would be, would narrate be the right word? Either way, to actually like point out that transformation would be the Batman films. Because we had the first Batman in 89, but Batman in 89 and 92 had a very similar feel, right? Like arguably that comes down to the director, but I think it's also just the tone of movies in general. But then when 95 hit and you got Batman Batman Forever, that tonal shift is so different. And I think that's where a lot of people feel like media from 95 onwards, I think, is where people more think of when they think of the 90s.
Yeah.
Is there really can't be stuff from the tail end. And that's fair. Like, it's part of it.
I'd agree with that. Yeah, Batman's actually a great example of that. Like, in that, like, group of four movies, what a tonal shift. Like, between Schumacher and...
Well, and it's not even a subtle shift. Like, it's like...
I forgot his
it's
name.
just...
I'm forgetting names like crazy. Yes, between the two Tim Burton Batman movies and the two Schumacher movies. Like, what a tonal difference. And not even a little bit. Like, night and day. Ridiculously crazy.
But, like, I can't even say that because in 95, we still had movies like... I mean, Toy Story came out, but, like, that's its own, like, beast. But, like... You had 12 Monkeys, you had Seven, you had Braveheart, you had Apollo 13, like GoldenEye. And that's another one too. Like, look at the Bond films, from GoldenEye to Die Another Day. Like, those are two very distinct tones of movies.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Die Hard with a Vengeance. Like again, even in 95, like, that's kind of where you can see some of the campiness starting. But overall, like, it's still... Man, I don't know. I just look at this and I get frustrated with how much, even when I think about the 90s and when I talk about it, I almost dismiss it as this really silly time. Like, and I always find myself talking and just like, it's almost like this weird glorification of the 80s, which is a time I wasn't alive for. I still ingested a lot of media from it, but I wasn't actually a part of the 80s. But like, There's just this current worldview of how great the 80s was, and maybe it's how 90s kids handled the 90s, because like there was always on the internet always just like, only 90s kids will get this, and it's like, no, not only 90s kids, and also you're a 2000s kid, shut up. Like,
also you weren't born yet.
Well, no, because like, so me and you, we were born in 91, but where was the majority of where is the majority of our cognizant memories and childhood?
95 on, right? Like,
it's
94, 95 on.
Between
like,
95
as far as, like,
and 2005.
Like, yeah, like, there's, like, memories. Like, you got, like, little memories here and there, like, as you're growing up, between, like, 1 and 4, I guess. Like, I just get little flashes and images. But my majority of memory of the 90s was, like, just before starting kindergarten, right? And then going forward.
Yep.
So that literally would have been, like, 94, 95 on. But, like, I wouldn't remember the earlier stuff.
It's a bizarre thing that we for some reason, our generation considers themselves purely, we only existed in the 90s, and it's like we don't want to acknowledge the fact that we also existed as kids in the 2000s. Yeah. And it's this weird, as I said, like it's almost this weird like nostalgia for eras that you weren't a part of. Like, we were a part of them, but not really. And it's just like the same thing how people are about the 80s now, and like I guarantee you the weirdest one is going to be when suddenly people start getting nostalgic about, like... I mean, I think they probably have, actually, about, like, the early 2000s, or, like, from 2000 to 2010, wasn't everything just crazy? And it's, like, it's a weird concept to think about.
speaking of like decades and identities, I feel like the early 2000s and the 2010s never really had that much of an identity. Like everything just kind of, as soon as you hit 2000, everything seems to like mold together. Like there's changes, but it's more like subtle. It felt like when you think of like the past decades, everything feels very like sharp and like cut off. Like this is the 60s, 70s, 80s. And I'm sure in actual timeline, it may have been a bit more subtle, but I wasn't alive for that, so I don't know. But I just thought it was interesting. I feel like since we got to the 2000s, that decade identity isn't exactly the same, or maybe we're just not doing such extreme styles.
No, actually,
but I don't know. I guess only history can tell. I guess time will tell as we keep moving forward.
That's a really good point though, because again, like we're technically, as soon as we change to the millennium, there's almost like this new way of perceiving time, because we base it on, you know, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and then we hit the 2000s. We're like, well, what do we call these now? Okay, well, it's the 2000s. Yeah. Okay, but 2010 happened. But 2010 happened. Okay, but it's still part of the 2000s because But is that going to be what it's like all the way up until the year 3000? Like it's all part of the 2000s,
or 2090, or 2900, I guess.
Yeah, and that's like that's
2900.
Well, that's where I think then we start calling things 2010s. But like I don't know. I think about movies that I try to think like about movies that came out in 2010, and I get them mixed up with ones that came out in like 2008 and 2005.
Yeah, like it just seems to all blur together way more than it did in the 90s or in the 1900s. 20th century. God damn it.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. I know what you're talking about. No, like that's,
you know what I'm saying.
But that's just, it's bizarre. It's bizarre that we had that much. It's almost like decades meant so much to us and then suddenly stopped having meaning. And like I know a lot of people have based that discussion around like what happened with 9/11 and all that kind of stuff, and how movies definitely changed after that. There's a definite tonal shift that happened in cinema after all that happened. But like, do you think that maybe why? Like maybe that just societal change.
I wouldn't say that's the key reason there, but I think it was just a change, and I think it's just more subtle in just how we look at things. And again, there just doesn't seem to be that decade of identity as there was in the 90s, even including film. But I think also because technology moves so fast, we don't have decades worth of identities and changes. It's kind of like periods of time, like a few years here, a few years there, that are very unique and different. But because technology, again, changes so fast, our lives move continually. Our lives change so quickly now. It's not like there's a decade and then a big shift or change. It's like every year there's something new, or every 6 months, or, you know. So I think even how technology works nowadays and how fast we're moving forward and changing constantly, I think that has something to do with it. Because even like when we left high school, my first cell phone I got was this awesome little, it was a Samsung, but it had like the slide and the keyboard underneath, right? There was no smartphones like this. And that was 11 years ago. So in 11 years, we went from a little slider boo-boo T9ing to having a computer that's incredibly powerful in our pockets, right? So it's not like there's this subtle shift. Like, and that happened over the course of time. Things happen just very quickly now. So I wonder if that has something to do with it.
Look at even the formatting of home video and how much that has changed. Like we went from VHS to DVD to Blu-ray to 4K now. Like it, and that was in a very short
now
time
digital
span.
Distribution's like the money, right? You know what I mean? Like,
like it's,
even how they distribute it. Distribute.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean. But like it's a bizarre thing to think about.
And like human technology didn't advance quickly until really the 20th century. Then you saw that big pickup. I guess you could argue the 19th too, with the Industrial Revolution starting to come into play there. But generally, human technology didn't change a lot or very quickly or very suddenly before that. Like I said, man, the bow and arrow, the sword and shield were the main use of combat weapons for the majority of human history, right? Guns are fairly recent in the history of mankind. Very recent. Like barely around for a blink of an eye.
because I want to say 1800s is when the guns started kind of really coming out. This is where I wish Prosser was still here, because he knows all that stuff. He's like, I think we were talking about.
Well, no, you got like the muskets and stuff. A lot of those things in the
Flintlock
1700s and
yeah,
a little like the really old type guns, right? Maybe even earlier than that. There was ideas and stuff for.
Well, I
them.
mean, technically, a cannon would be considered a gun, right? Like, because it's, and then they just shrank it and put it in their hands.
Oh yeah, I guess cannons have been around also too for quite a bit of a while.
But like,
I'm just saying the weapons we have nowadays and how much even those have advanced since then. You know, the bow and arrow never changed that much, or it's not like we had swords for 100 years and people moved on to guns and then on to the next thing. You know what I mean? Like these weapons and technologies have been vastly unchanged for the majority of human history. What are we talking about right now? I don't even know what we're talking about. But the fact is, film is awesome. I mean, film's another great way too. Like, it's just changed so much.
The technology in film has also changed so
considerably.
Much. Like, yeah. And I think, actually, going back to the point with it, I think that's another thing probably that really added to that cheesy, campy feel that people felt with the 90s, is because that was... The 90s was the beginning of CG, right? Like, I'm listening to Creativity Inc. It's about one of the founders of Pixar.
Okay,
he's talking about, like, highly recommended, actually. Like, definitely you should listen to it. I think you'd get a kick out of it. And he's talking about how, like, Pixar and that digital, the digital effects and stuff like that, what came from that really picked up in the 90s, because it was Terminator 2 and Terminator 2.
Jurassic Park was a big one.
Jurassic Park's the one that changed everything, but like everything, before that, it was like Terminator 2 was kind of the inkling of like, oh, something else could happen. And there was another one too, but then Jurassic Park came out, and then Toy Story came out, and that just like changed the game. But the problem was when they started making those switches to like, oh, but we can do things digitally. When it was just digital, like Spawn is a good example of like, oh, it's just digital effects, and it's bad. Whereas
it does not hold up. Yeah,
if they would have done a mix, like they did with Jurassic Park, it would have looked a lot better. But a lot of times when they did CG, they didn't know how to utilize that tool, and arguably they really didn't know how to utilize it until, as we discussed last episode, episode 1, until they used it in Star Wars Episode 1. That's kind of when you got that first like, oh, you can use CG effects for a lot and get away with a lot when you do things properly and take the time.
And I mean, arguably we do them now today better than ever before, right? Like if you would show someone from the 80s Infinity War, like if you could take it back in time and
how'd you
show
get that guy in a purple suit
from Infinity, exactly, they would have no doubt in their mind that he's a real thing. You know what I mean? Like he doesn't look, they've created digital effects now to be so realistic. And a lot, especially when you watch like the Oscars and stuff, and they show you the digital breakdown for that, you know, award for CGI and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You don't even realize you're looking at digital things most of the time. Like most of the stuff that's in there, you don't even realize you're looking at digitally constructed backgrounds. Or I think there was one from the movie
1917?
1917. Wow. Yeah. Man, I'm just having a terrible day with my brain today.
That's cool.
But they showed a scene where there was like a barn or something on fire, and I haven't seen the movie yet. But then they like took all the digital stuff away. The barn wasn't even there, man. Don't even talk about the fire. The barn wasn't there. So it's like there's so many things that are digitally created in movies that, like, obviously Infinity War, we're like, oh wow, look at the digital effects. But there's so many digital effects in movies that are just, you wouldn't expect them to be there, but are there, and you have no freaking clue.
We reached this weird point in cinema where
crazy.
I'm actually seeing people like post and brag about like using practical effects on set. There's been a couple big films. I think The Eternals was one of them where they're like, yeah, it's really cool. We're actually shooting on a set and we're shooting on this stuff. It's not just a green screen. I'm like, this shouldn't be stuff you're bragging about. This should just be like, this should be normal. This is how things have been done in film for so long. But now it's reached a point where like we got so far with technology that everything was in front of a blue screen. And now it's suddenly like, oh, we don't need those blue screens, so we can actually shoot on location and on set, and then just digitally add whatever we want in there. And it's just such a weird reverse of how like it almost
Well, I
feels
like
like,
how it's coming back to like mix with like practical effects as well.
because that's how it should
That's
be,
the best
because
effect.
that's it always looks the best. It always, when you have
Yeah.
a mix of practical and CG together working in tandem, it's always gonna
That's
just
money,
be the
man.
best.
That's
Yeah,
money.
and it's just like the problem I think with the 90s was that they didn't quite understand that, except for the few exceptions, because again, Jurassic Park still holds up to this day.
It does.
Like,
It does, yeah.
like you go back and you believe that that's a real dinosaur. Like,
For a movie that came out in 93, that's impressive.
100%. Like, that's, man, I just want to go back and watch a bunch of movies from the 90s now. I actually do. Actually, that's a decade. That is a decade that I revisit a lot of movies from. Like, there's the 80s and stuff like that, and there's the 70s. I kind of bounce around, but like, I don't know, maybe it is a nostalgia thing. Maybe that's exclusively what it is that I just have a nostalgia connection with the 90s, and that's why I just keep going back. But like, I don't know, even like animated films and the cartoons, like the Disney Renaissance happened. Like, it's such an important time in history, and I feel like it just kind of gets overshadowed. But that being said, second thought that just popped into my brain now, is it possibly because the good films that came out of the 90s are considered classics, and most classic films are timeless?
Interesting thought.
Because think about classic films from the 80s, 70s, all that kind of stuff. You can pinpoint what a classic film is, but can you always pinpoint exactly what decade it came out in? And I'm wondering if maybe that's also it too, is like, it's because I mean, when you think about the Disney Renaissance, there's some people who are like, oh, it's so 90s, but if you actually look at it, like, no, if you told me that they made Beauty and the Beast in the 80s, or you told me they made it in the 2000s, sure, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a story that holds up without being reliant on a decade. In my opinion, I think that's when it comes to storytelling, that's an incredibly important thing, is not having that reliance on a decade. And that's kind of, I think, like, to go on a complete side thing here, that's one of my problems with Stranger Things. Like, I like Stranger Things, I like the story, but it's so reliant on, like, hey guys, we're in the 80s. Isn't that great? Isn't that cool? We're in the 80s. Look at all the 80s things. And it's like, okay. But like, I think I made the argument you could take Stranger Things out of the 80s and set it in any time period and the story wouldn't change. And that, to me, kind of makes it feel like the decade is too dependent on the decade to sell itself. But I think the story is still good enough. You could base it in any decade.
No, that's an interesting thought, man.
I don't know.
Because there's a lot of like really iconic and classic movies that, yeah, maybe you don't necessarily think like, ooh, a 90s movie. You're just like, that was a good movie.
Well, that's again, like, I'm wondering, now that like we've gotten into it, I'm wondering if are we biased on this topic because of the decade we were born in? Or,
could be. Like in the movies that we watched growing up too, right?
Yeah, they just always seem... Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of movies too that we mistake for 90s movies. I think, like, because like a lot of like Land Before Time, I'm pretty sure was an 89 movie.
Yeah, I think so.
Like, there's a lot of those movies that came out around Beetlejuice. I thought was a 90s. I thought Beetlejuice was a 90s movie, and it came out in 88. Like,
yeah,
there's a lot of movies from the 80s that I'm like, oh well, clearly that was a 90s movie because I watched it growing up, and it's like, no, man, no. I think Dark Crystal I thought was a 90s movie, and I'm pretty sure that was also the 80s. Oh man, I forgot about the Goofy movie. That was a 90s movie. That was 95, but like, I don't know. Maybe I've gotten way off topic and way off track here, but I don't mind. I'm actually enjoying this talk quite a bit. And also, maybe it's just a me and you thing, because like, would you say that you grew up, like, how important was movies, like, how important were movies and media to you growing up?
Super important, man. I love them. Like, I've always loved stories, and I've always loved great characters and great movies, like, even as a kid. Like, one of my favorites was Forrest Gump, man. Like, Forrest freaking Gump. As a kid, I loved Forrest Gump. Like, I can't even tell you how many times I watched that movie.
How old were you when you saw it?
Man, I don't know. Like, it'd have to be like 6, 7, 8. You know what I mean?
Jeez.
Like, very, like, end of the, like, I wasn't old when I saw Forrest Gump. I loved this movie when I was a little kid. I
16.
Like, yeah, no, I saw it way earlier than that. And I loved Forrest Gump. Like, we watched it a lot. Me and my brother watched it a lot. So, like movies like that, even not just kids movies, but like movies like that were a huge part of growing up and being able to sit down with family and enjoy these stories and just, yeah, have a great time.
Like for me personally, I was like, I joke about it, but it's kind of true. Is like I was raised by TV. Like my parents raised me. Like obviously my parents did,
Yeah.
but like honestly, anytime I'd be playing, I'd be watching a movie or I'd have TV on. I actually like we had schedules for cleaning our rooms and cleaning the house on Saturdays, and I based my schedule around my TV shows and around my TV time. Where it's
Yeah.
like I'd wake up at 6 in the morning, watch TV till about 10, watch the shows I wanted to, go clean my room, do that stuff, come back and watch TV for a couple more hours, go and clean this thing, come back, and like it was just always such a big, like movies were always there for me. As bad as that, like that sounds like no one else was there for me, but they were. But like it's that Charlie Brown thing coming back. But like movies were always there, and it was just such an important thing that I think like I don't know. I think that's also where me and you kind of maybe have a bit of a bias towards some of the stuff we grew up with, because like it's
Yeah, some of the 90s movies, because like you loved them then, like
they were
it's hard not to love them now.
they were there
And-
for me when my friends weren't.
I mean, I don't know. It's not so much like
No, of course not.
It's not so much like that, but it's just great. Like it was just what sparked my love for stories, like
Well, 'cause-
and great stories and good stories. And as human beings, we're wired to love stories, right? But some just connect a little bit more than others, or some maybe cared about more going outside. Like we went outside and played a ton too.
Oh,
But
yeah.
where did our imaginations get these ideas for what we were playing, right?
Oh yeah,
You know?
like the amount of times I based things off superheroes. It was because of the comics
Yeah.
I read and also the movies I watched.
Spider-Man cartoons, man, my favorite.
Yeah.
Man, we wake up, we'd watch the Spider-Man animated series,
Like the
We'd
90s
watch
one?
the Men in Black. Yeah, the Men
Yeah.
in Black animated series, and there was
Godzilla?
one more movie, Godzilla. Yeah,
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 yeah.
that was magic, man. That was magic. I loved it. So man, there's just like TV shows, movies, incredibly important part. Like we talk about screen time nowadays, and kids shouldn't have too much screen time, and I agree because you want them to go outside and like do those types of things too. But again, it's kind of like CGI and practical effects. It's a combination of those two that really bring forth
100%.
creativity and being able to develop in that sort of way. And not only as kids do you have these great stories, but you get to interact and see these characters that you become fond of. And maybe you see yourself in the characters or even someone to look up to. Like as a kid, sometimes there's those characters that you have, you're like, I want to be like that. So it can even shape your morality as a human being going forward to who you want to be. So they're incredible. Like stories, whether they're in movies, books, comic books, TV shows,
Video games.
video games, the stories that we get to tell are incredibly powerful and impact our lives, I think, more than we really give them credit for a lot of the time. But no, man, like it was an incredibly important part growing up.
It's almost
Incredibly
reached a
important.
point where there's so much content now where I feel like maybe that's where the screen time thing becomes an issue, because you're
it's true,
taking
yeah.
in so much media that you're not really actually like you're taking it in, but you're not taking it in. It doesn't
when we
maybe
were
that doesn't make sense, but like
You're right. Like when we were kids, we watched movies and we had our TV shows, but those things didn't go on for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. You know what I mean? Like the kids' cartoons were over, adult stuff started. Okay, well I'm going outside because this is boring and I don't care. You know what I mean?
Well, there
Nowadays,
wasn't-
though,
you
you
weren't
can
binging
watch your
things,
kid
right?
shows. Then you could exactly, and then you can go on YouTube. You can go on Netflix. You can just you could watch all day, easy.
we
watch
had to
all
wait
day.
a
And
week
before
for
that wasn't-
every episode.
that
We
wasn't-
had it hard.
Well, yeah, it's just not the same. It's not the same. There's way more media, way more information to consume than there was before. But like I said, it's not one way or the other. It's the balance of those two. Getting
100%.
outside, doing those things, practicing your imagination, whether you're writing or playing with toys or, but also being able to consume some of those ideas and content. That's all part of creating a good, healthy creativity, and give some kids some dreams, man. Kids need dreams. Escape from
I just
reality.
remembered. So like, when I was a kid, I wasn't like my parents never really bought me villain action figures. They always
yeah?
bought me the heroes. So like I create these scenarios with like these super like I had like 12 different Batmans, and like I totally built like this whole like multiverse world of like these are the good Batmans, these are the bad ones, and they need to
Bad
fight with
Batman.
each other, and it's just like
Yeah,
that's just it's such
out
a
of
weird
necessity.
yeah, out of necessity, but also like I knew the multiverse was a thing somehow.
Yeah.
But another question for you on is there a specific time in your life where you started actively seeking out movies from different decades or from different time periods? That ever happened to you or not really? Or is it just kind of like movies?
Not really. It wasn't. What decade they came from wasn't really always important to me. It was more important if I just heard they were really good movies. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many, like,
Yeah.
like you've told me movies, you gotta watch this or you gotta see this, and there are still a lot, arguably, that I haven't seen yet, and that I have to keep going back and looking for. Yeah, it was a couple years ago that I finally watched like the opposite movie to Forrest Gump, which was the Shawshank Redemption that year. Like those two were both in contending for Best Picture in the Oscars.
Okay.
Forrest Gump won, but arguably you could say Shawshank Redemption was ultimately over time has become the more valued movie. I still like Forrest Gump, but a lot of people consider Shawshank Redemption still today better than Forrest Gump. Which one's better? Not important. But I just saw a couple years ago Shawshank Redemption. And it wasn't like I wasn't going to look for 90s movies. I just knew this was a movie that people really loved, and I knew I had to see it. And I loved that movie too. It was great. So I've never really had, even today, I don't necessarily go out of my way to like look for decade specific films. Just movies that people are like, this is a movie you have to see. Those are the ones I try and find.
No, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Actually, it's funny because like to answer my own question, if there's a genre that I did do that for, it would have been horror. Horror is the one where it's like I'm looking for 80s horror, I'm looking for 70s horror, that kind of stuff to kind of see that evolution.
Which is a bit more unique in decade to decade.
Well, because even if you look at like the 1940s with the Universal monsters and stuff like that, and watch how that evolves, throughout time, like yeah, I guess like that's really the only genre that I've really done that for, aside from like 80s action movies. But that didn't happen until I went to college and met my roommate, who's like all about 80s action.
But then again, that's like almost a genre in itself. You know what I mean?
100%.
Like that specific 80s action. It's not like you were like, I'm looking for action movies in the 80s. Like, no, you're looking for 80s action, which is really its own specific type of movie.
Let's be honest. If you're looking for 80s action movies, you mean you're watching Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, or Bruce Willis. That's what you're looking for.
Yeah, that's pretty much it, man.
Right?
That's pretty much it, yeah.
But like it's weird. It's a weird thing, because I'm even thinking about like adventure movies and war movies never really depended on the decade. Romance movies never depended on the decade. Psychological thrillers never depended on the decade, but definitely like horror's the big one. Actually, but also to segue back to the 90s had one of the best horror remakes ever made, and that is The Mummy. Pretty sure that was 99, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was definitely in the 90s.
Because I want to say The Mummy.
I feel like it was. Unless it was
I want to say
2000s.
I want to say The Mummy 2 was 2001 or 2002.
We got Google.
I guess I need to type in movies. I put in list of 1999, and it's like, what do you mean? Like, get a bit more specific. Oh, The Matrix came out in 99. I always forget about that. Because that doesn't feel like a 90s movie.
Yeah.
Yep, The Mummy. The Mummy came out in 99, and arguably that is the best remake of a Universal monster movie, let alone a horror movie, in my opinion.
There is something so classic about that movie. Even the sequel wasn't that bad. Like, you got Brendan Fraser in there. Like, it was a fun time. The third one wasn't good. The Tomb of the Dragon Emperor was not good. It was not good. But the other one's quite charming.
When you cast someone to play their son and he looks about as old as Brendan Fraser, that's kind of a problem.
That's strange.
And like it didn't, like, I had to turn it off. I just got bored. Like, it wasn't even that like I was like, this is bad and I can't watch it. It was just like I just have no interest. I lost interest.
I was so excited when I found out there was a third Mummy movie coming. I was like, hell to the yeah. And I was actually in Alberta at the time. We were visiting some like family and stuff in a small town, Rocky Mountain House.
Yeah.
And we went to the theater to go see it. And this was like a theater that had like, it was a small town theater, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
like literal like chairs that you stack up, those wooden crappy ones. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So that's what was there, and like the ticket price was literally like $1, and I was like, dope, let's go watch The Mummy. I watched the movie and I was like, I want my buck back. That was the worst thing I've ever seen. I was so disappointed. I paid $1 and I felt ripped off, man. Like, it's ridiculous.
I watched it, dude. I watched it for free on Netflix, and well, not for free because I pay for Netflix. But like, regardless, I wanted my.
You're like, I want my subscription back for this month.
I want the last hour and a half of my life back. Like,
yeah, that's the biggest thing. You'll never get that back. That was another great movie I remember from my childhood. Home Alone we watched a lot. That was a big one. Saving Private Ryan was on a lot at my house, which is not a kid's movie, but we watched it. I'm like, did my mom care what movie we were watching? Backdraft was another big one we watched as kids a lot.
see, these movies are ones like Saving Private Ryan and Backdraft. I saw Saving Private Ryan like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Backdraft I saw last year. I mentioned, I think earlier to you, I saw The Mask for the first time. Like, three years ago.
Yeah.
Man, you know what Jim Carrey movie is like massively underrated?
Which one?
The Cable Guy. Have you seen The Cable Guy?
Is it underrated? Yeah.
I think
like
so.
The Cable Guy. Oh, I've always held it like pretty high. Most of his movies from the 90s I've held pretty high.
A lot of people I've talked to, they're just like, yeah, it's okay. It's all right. It's not as good. It's not The Mask or Ace Ventura, and it's like,
but it was still funny.
it's funny, but it's also like, it's funny, but it's also horrifying, but like in a interesting way.
Yeah. Another comedian from the 90s, like Adam Sandler movies, right, were great in the 90s. Like that was his
Mr.
money right
Deeds.
there, man. Great. Freaking Happy Gilmore, man. That's always Happy Gilmore is probably like Billy Madison was good and all that stuff, and Waterboy.
Never seen Billy Madison. Never seen Waterboy. I
They were good, but like Happy Gilmore, man, is always gonna be my Adam Sandler #1 favorite movie of all time. I don't even care what else he makes. Happy Gilmore is honestly the funniest movie. Every time I see it on TV, I'm like, I'm watching it, and every time I bust a gut. Like every time it's like you're watching it for the first time. That was another big movie of our childhood that we absolutely loved. It's so funny, man. So like even just the comebacks between him and Shooter McGavin, like just make me laugh all the time. He's like, oh man, I eat pieces of shit like you for breakfast. You eat shit for breakfast? Like it's.
That's one I didn't see until like I saw that one on TV the first time actually.
Oh
That
yeah.
was the first place I saw it, and honestly,
man.
like I've only seen that a couple times. But Mr.
Chubbs
Deeds was the one that
getting in fights. With,
Mr. Deeds was the one that I liked the most, man. It was,
Mr. Deeds was good too. Mr. Deeds was good too. Was that? I feel like that was the early 2000s though, was it? Or is that?
No, I think that was 90s.
90s.
I'll look this up. We'll
I
figure
feel
this
like
out.
it was in the early 2000s, or else it would have been like 98, 99.
Also, I want to say Mr. Deeds is 2002. You're right, Matt.
Boom.
I let you down. I'm
Not
sorry.
your favorite Adam Sandler's 90 movie, but it's okay.
Well, I guess that would go to Happy Gilmore as well because I haven't seen any of the other ones.
Mrs.
I'm not a big Adam
Doubtfire?
Sandler fan.
Money, man.
Man, I love
Money.
that one.
Hello.
I want to say is Happy Gil. Yeah, 96. Okay, yeah, you're right. I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Again, Adam Sandler's not my thing. Robin Williams, though. Now that you brought up Mrs. Doubtfire.
Yeah.
Yes.
Man, you made me feel
I just
so
got
nostalgic
sad.
about the 90s right now. Like, man, I'm just like, God, there's so many good movies that we watched growing up. Like,
Right?
Just-
like, and they're ones
just
you don't really
memories
think
from-
about.
as kids, yeah. And you're like, damn,
that's
those
it.
were good movies.
It actually like segued into my next point or my next question was actually what are your favorite movie memories growing up, but I think we've been talking about that.
Yeah, I feel like we have. I thought that
But
was
hey,
intentional.
I'm cool with it, man. Space Jam is probably one of mine. Probably one of my favorite movie memories. Probably one of my just favorite childhood movies growing up. Mm-hmm. Like it's I don't even know why.
I can fly.
I'm not a big basketball fan.
I can touch the sky. Do you want me to sing in the background while you like monologue?
Reminisce about.
While you reminisce, thinking all night and day.
Well, it was when I was really young, and I got to go and see it in the theaters without a parent. It was the first movie I saw without parental supervision, and it just changed my life and really had a massive impact on me as a. It did though, like it actually did. Like
believe you could fly.
It kind of did. Like that's.
It kind of did.
Man, it's such a silly concept and such a silly movie, but like it's got heart to it. It's got a lot of good feeling to it, and it's just,
and even the animation was pretty good too. Like the mix between animation and realism was really good, especially at the time.
Like 100%. Like the only two times they've been able to pull that off, but might be the only two times they've really done it, would be that and Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Yeah.
But
I think they've done it in other things. I just don't know if it sat well. I can't really think off the top of my head of any high profile movies.
And that's the thing, you can't really think about it. There's not really anything that jumps out at you, but those two, and that's because those two embraced what that was. It was a mixture of animation and live action, whereas a lot of times for other ones, it's not so much embraced quite as much.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's like we were talking about the potential of Space Jam 2 and whether or not, like, if they do Space Jam 2 and it's not 2D animated Looney Tunes characters and they do try and do like some CG stuff,
CGI kind of weird stuff. Yeah,
I think it's gonna look cheap. It's gonna look a lot worse.
You got to keep the magic. Try and capture the magic.
Exactly. Make it look the same. Like, that just makes the most sense to me.
Wayne's World is another classic, man. Wayne's World. I'm just looking through some of the movies in the 90s. Wayne's World, man. We love that one. That was kind of like my first taste of like Queen and Bohemian Rhapsody, man. That is such an iconic scene, man. So iconic. Party on Wayne, party on Garth. Wayne's World.
I didn't actually watch that one till I was in my teens as well. Like for me, there was a lot of like Foxy.
If I just start singing, keep talking, man. I'll just I don't mean to distract.
Oh, no worries. I don't mind. I'm having a good time. That's the main point of this, is for us to have a good time.
Yeah, that's it.
Like,
screw you guys.
A lot of the movies I grew up with,
I'm gonna cut that out.
Nah, keep it in. A lot of the movies I grew up with were kids movies. They were family friendly ones. And then as I got older, that's when I started like going back and discovering like the teen movies or the movies that weren't necessarily family friendly from the 90s. And that's kind of been, it's been really interesting to come across those movies on my own rather than just having them always be a part of me, because it's just like it just, I don't know, man, there's just a sense of satisfaction of like, I came to this movie on my own. I found my own path to this one rather than it just being a part of my nostalgia, right? Like it's been a weird journey for me with some of those movies. And like a lot of movie discovery for me didn't happen until I was about, I'd say, between 14 to 18. But also that came from like my family had a weird rule where it's like I guess it's not super weird, but it was like a rule where we could only watch the movies that the ratings lined up with our ages. So like,
oh yeah,
I could only watch. It
was a lot like that.
No, the weird part was I could watch PG movies until I was 13. Then I could watch PG-13 movies, but I couldn't watch 14A movies, even though they're the same group. And then I could watch 14A movies, but I couldn't watch rated R movies. Then I could watch rated R movies, but I couldn't watch 18A movies. Like, it was just this weird not understanding about how the rating systems worked. And it was... I don't regret that at all, though, because I think it definitely kept me from seeing things. And let's be honest, by the time we were 16, we were all watching whatever we wanted to anyway. That wasn't really...
More or less. Apparently, I watched whatever I want to when I was 8, so I don't know.
And different households, right? But, like, there's one day my dad came in and he saw my movie collection, and he's like, there's a lot of movies here that I don't want you watching. And I'm like, yep. And he's like, I can't stop you from watching these movies, can I? I'm like, nope. He's like, okay, fine. Like,
fair enough.
But I think there was also an understanding, even at a young age, there was an understanding with my family that I knew the difference between a movie and reality.
Yeah.
As soon as I saw it was like there was never a point where I'm like, never mind. There was a stupid point where it's like, I was
Batman.
running. No, it was a Star Wars one. I was running.
Oh.
I was running on a treadmill. So I was like old enough to run on a treadmill. So obviously not too young, and I was like trying to like focus and concentrate, one with the force, all that kind of stuff. And then like
Right.
I close my eyes, I'm not paying attention to how fast I'm running, and I end up falling off the back of the treadmill. And just fell off. I didn't like hurt myself or anything.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, yeah, but I got this. I'm focused. I'm good. I can do this. And I jumped back onto the treadmill thinking I could just jump and do this because
Keep going, yeah.
it happens in the movies. I'm basically a Jedi, all this kind of stuff. And like again, I'm probably older in this story than I would like to admit. So I run at it and I jump, but when I jump, the treadmill's moving. And guess how I land?
Straight down.
It wasn't
Not
running.
moving.
It was just so like I land, plant my feet, and just shoots back out from under.
We all do really dumb things as slightly older kids than we'd like to admit.
When I to go back on another tangent too about how movies affected me. When I was 5, my parents put me to bed, and then heard this thumping sound coming from my room.
Yeah.
And they come into my room and they see 5-year-old Ethan throwing himself at the wall trying to stick to it. And they're like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm Spider-Man. I'm trying to climb the wall." I'm really not making a good case for me to be like a smart like being an adult in charge of his own life or anything else. Like it's like it didn't happen last week, but like it's one of those things of like there's sometimes I think about those stories and I'm like, how am I a functioning human being? Like how did I ever grow out of that? Thank goodness I did. Thank goodness it's not like 29-year-old Ethan throwing himself against the wall being like, why
trying
am
to
I still
stick
not
like Spider-Man. Yeah, that would be a really awkward roommate situation. I'd be like, okay, well, you're clearly a psychopath.
All right, I'm gonna be moving and good luck with the rest of your life.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm leaving right now.
Like
Signs of incredible delusion.
I mean, man, I want to be an artist for a living. I'm pretty sure that's like the biggest sign of like incredible delusion.
I think so.
Yeah.
Incredibly delusioned, yeah.
I'm going to make art and get paid for it. Yeah, you do that, little buddy.
You have to be the key is to actually be able to do that, you have to be stupid enough to believe you can do that. So they have to come together. You can't do one without the other. Because if you don't believe it at all, it ain't happening. You have to believe it to some degree.
There's got to be a balance of grounding with it, though, because, like, if you think that it's just going to be like, oh, I'm going to pack up my stuff and move and get discovered. Like that was the thing. As a kid growing up, I had this, like, fantasy of me playing, like, in the front yard, and, like, a car would pull up and be like, we want you for this next movie, like, in the middle of Saskatoon, middle of nowhere. And I'm like, yeah, that's how it's going to be. That's why I need to leave my house, so I can get discovered and be in a movie. That's not how it works. And I'm really glad that I don't just sit outside my house now, wait for it. Like, someone's gonna find me, right?
Especially as a kid, you hear so many stories of people like making it, right? Or like the one that's like probably one of the most famous is Sylvester Stallone writing his script for Rocky, like when he had nothing left. You know what I mean? Like nothing, and he was like living on the streets and stuff, and then got a deal, and now movie star, right? But for every story like that, there's like 3 billion other stories that you don't hear of people not making it, right? So like while that is inspiring, the probability of that is you still have to be smart about it. You still need to have the slight delusion that you're going to do it, but you also have to be smart enough to know that you can't just expect that to happen. Like you can't move out there and not get a job and just expect to be a movie star. Again, balance in all things, man. Balance in all things.
Unfortunately, though, there's just this narrative now about, like, the starving artist narrative, where it's like, well, if I'm not struggling, then I haven't earned it. And it's like, no, you can have a job and still work at your art. Yeah. Maybe it's going to take you a little longer than, like, consistently having to, you know, go from job to job to job. Maybe it is going to, like, maybe it will take you a bit longer if you have to work. But, like, having a job and following your art, there's no shame in that. There's absolutely none. No. And I think there's a stigma there that needs to go away, where it's like, no, unless you're giving 110% of your entire life always to this art, you can still be giving 110% to your art, but you might be having to balance that with other things in life, like a job or like your family or something, right?
A lot of people like work for a while, then they'll then they'll quit. Whatever, they save up money, then they'll quit and focus squarely on doing whatever they want for whatever, 6 months. And then when they need money again, they go get another job, right? Like, that's definitely a way too. You definitely got to find that balance.
As long as you can survive, man. Like, that's the most important thing, is take care of yourself.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, especially ones who get in the arts, they don't think about that to the fullest extent. And there's got to be a thing of, like, take care of yourself, because your art is, you will sacrifice things for your art. It is important, but it's not important if you're dead. Like, that's the thing. Is like,
arguably maybe more important. No, I don't want to put that out there.
Well, that's
I just think of like all the old guys who are Leonardo da Vinci. They're dead. Their art's way more popular now than it ever was when they were alive.
But that's something to also remember too, is, you know what? Maybe your art isn't going to make an impact right now. It might be something. It might be a legacy that you leave after your time.
You never know.
Passed.
Yeah.
But
you got to do it for the love of it, man.
Exactly. Do it because
number one.
Like, I get paid for it too. I'm gonna do that. But like, at the end of the day, if I didn't love it, I wouldn't be pursuing it. I wouldn't.
Yeah.
Like,
fulfill your purpose, man.
If I didn't love storytelling, if I didn't love movie making, if I didn't love music, if I didn't love any of that stuff, then I wouldn't have the kind of passion and feeling that I do about it. And that's maybe that's just the magic of the arts, but
I think we all have a purpose in life. I think we're all called to something greater than just honestly a 9-to-5 job, unless maybe you're just really passionate about flipping burgers or whatever, or that is your purpose in life. Maybe, I don't know, maybe you're meant to be a great chef, who knows, crazy times. But we all have a calling and a purpose in life too, right? It's just trying to achieve that and fulfill that, because that's what you feel in your chest, right? That's what you feel in your gut. Well, that calling, that drive to do those things. It's not just because, I want to do it because fun times. It's because you have to do it. Your soul, your whole being demands you to do it. And I think even those things are placed, again, when we're kids and we get to watch these amazing movies and stories and become impacted, and they really affect the direction of our lives. And it's just figuring that all out. It's crazy, man.
Some people want to be biologists.
Life is crazy.
Some people want to be...
Well, yeah, some people are called to do like science and number, like everyone of all types, right? And we need everyone. Not everyone's called to write. Not everyone's called to, make movies and tell stories. Like, that's not the only calling out there. There's so many callings, but I think we all just, whatever our calling is, we just have to, be aware of that. And sometimes when you deny it too, that's where people end up falling into a lot of like different depressions and anger and frustration and unfulfillment. Right? Because they're not completing what their purpose really is, or what their calling is. And again, it doesn't have to be your full-time job either, but just doing it, right? Yeah. Even on the side.
There's nothing wrong with a side hustle, nothing wrong with hobbies. There's nothing wrong with anything like that. Just right. I think at the end of the day,
that's a weird topic. How'd we get here?
I don't know. That's the message of the day, is do what you love at the end of the day, whether it's, I don't know, making movies or growing a garden or whatever. Like, do what you love. I think that's kind of maybe that's an intrinsically 90s value that we got, or that's just a value from like a timeless value from just humanity in general. But it's something that
believe you can fly, baby.
Exactly. That's how we got here.
I believe I can fly.
I almost said Spaceballs. I'm like, that's a different movie. That's the
touch the sky. Not 90s, but great.
Just to kind of close up our talks about the 90s and stuff like that. What would you say your favorite movie from the 90s is?
Man, why are you gonna be asking me questions like that? There's so many. I just talked about a whole bunch of them.
If you had to pick one movie to watch from the 90s.
You son of a...
Son of a biscuit.
You son of a... Sweet Jesus. Sweet Christmas. My favorite movie from the 90s.
There's only one you can pick. And you have to...
Okay, can I just do another shout out? Okay, Dumb and Dumber was also in the 90s, and it was great. And so was Starship Troopers. Did you ever watch Starship Troopers?
Yes, Starship Troopers.
That was a huge one in my house as well. Okay, but those aren't my favorite.
Dumb and Dumber I've never seen.
My God, you should watch it. What is wrong with you, man? There's
a lot.
Classic. The sequels aren't like as great as the original, but the OG is. It's good. It's good. Okay. It's for sure not Romeo and Juliet, because that movie was bunk. That was one of those weird 90 movies. And it came out in 96, so you're right. 95 over, maybe a couple weird movies started coming out.
Yep.
Okay, you go first. I gotta think about this.
I like so that. Hard. I appreciate that you think that I actually had an answer for this question and didn't just surprise myself with it too. Honestly, though, looking
you asked it. You go first.
I know. I'm fine with that. I guess so.
Oh man.
Honestly, looking at it, if I had to pick one from the 90s, and this kind of maybe comes out of nowhere, but honestly, I would probably say it's a toss-up. Because I watched so many movies from the 90s. Like, a lot. Holy crap. I didn't realize how much my life was built around the 90s, which is kind of silly, considering, like...
That's when we, that's when life began, man. At least for us.
No, that was the beginning of the universe, let's be honest here.
The universe began in the 90s.
It's a toss-up between... The Mask, because honestly, I know I just found that one recently, but like it's just so good.
It's so good.
But it's between that and maybe I'm gonna hate myself for saying it because there's so many good animated movies that came out, but I think it's the Iron Giant.
Oh, I totally forgot about that movie too. That was such another one from the. You're even wearing the shirt, man.
It's a Ready Player One shirt, but that's because he's in the movie. But like
he's in the movie, yeah. That was another one that was in the house all the time that we watched so much. Vin Diesel voiced the Iron Giant. You know that?
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. He's really good at minimal lines and grunting, apparently.
Yeah.
Even in the Fast and the Furious movies.
Family.
Yeah. But like no, like the Iron Giant is just such a yeah. But it's just the Iron Giant is just such a good movie. It's a good family movie, but it's got some really good like good adult humor in there too. It's just a really good, well balanced movie, and as a piece of animation, it's like breathtaking. Like it's so good. And that's where I think that's like I love The Mask. I like it a lot. And I like Aladdin came out, Lion King, Beauty and the Beast, Hercules. Like, there's a bunch of other like good Disney animation, but like but like the Iron Giant
is something special. Like it is its own thing.
It is, and it's
very good. It is a very good movie.
Would you ever want to see a sequel?
I don't know. Like sometimes sequels just seem unnecessary. I thought it was a perfect story, just how it was.
Yeah, even the way it ends on that cliffhanger.
How it ended, yeah.
Like, and that's where like, if it's the same thing as like, it's actually funny because it's the same creator. It's Brad Bird, and I love Brad Bird. He's an amazing filmmaker. But it's the same thing with Incredibles. Like, I'm glad they waited to make Incredibles 2 when they had the story to tell for Incredibles 2.
Yeah.
If Brad
Don't
Bird,
just do it for the sake of it.
If Brad Bird came back with an Iron Giant 2, and he knew, like, he's like, I want to tell this story with Iron Giant, I'd be on board for it. I'd trust him as long as it's in the same type of animation. But I'd never want to see it forced. I think that's, man, like, even the soundtrack is really good. Like, it's just, man, like, yeah, like, I forget, like, that's the Iron Giant's another one I forget is from the 90s.
Yeah.
Completely, like, but no, like, it's just, like, it's,
man,
it's been a nostalgia train today.
Dude, I'm losing my mind, yeah.
Did I give you too hard of a question?
Yeah, because there's, like, so many, I'm just trying to think, like, Sixth Sense, that's a 90s movie, Boys in the Hood, Independence Day, like, come on, how was anyone supposed to pick one movie?
Do you know about my tradition with Independence Day?
No, what's that?
So I whittle it down because you know how the movie spans 3 days from like July 2nd. So like for a while I actually would watch it like once a day from like July 2nd, July 3rd, and July 4th.
Nice.
I've saved myself the sanity, and now it's like every 4th of July. I have to watch Independence Day because it's so good. I like, and it's like that's another one. Like it's so good, but it's also so that's where like. It's such a 90s movie, though.
Men in Black? God.
Yep.
Like, there's just... This is literally hurting my brain. I can't...
I'm happy.
Home Alone. There's the Home Alone movies.
And Home Alone 2.
Great. Yeah. Those first two. Anything after that, forget it. But the first two, money.
Lost in New York? That's a stupid movie title. How do you get lost in New York?
The Blair Witch Project. I was in there. Oh, man. I don't even know. Like, because anything I say, I'm going to hate myself for not picking a different, you know what I mean? For not picking a different one.
Okay.
You know what, man? I'm going to go with just Jurassic Park because as a little kid, I love dinosaurs and I still love them. And Jurassic Park is an amazing movie. So well done. You got the score by John Williams. You got all the animatronics, the CGI. The dinosaurs look so real.
The acting
Steven
is
Spielberg
on point.
at the helm, right? Like you just...
It's so good.
Okay, yeah. And I mean, it's right, and there's movies that are right even with it. Like, but I gotta say that's probably my favorite. Forrest Gump was really good. Again, we loved Forrest Gump watching that movie. Bubba. I gotta save my Bubba. Just like I love it.
Man, now you're making me want to watch Forrest. You're making me want to watch Forrest Gump now.
I love you, Jedi. We got all kinds of shrimp, gumbo shrimp, jump shrimp, shrimp with coconut. I can't remember all the types of shrimp, but it was like that movie's so good.
A lot of shrimp.
Dan. There's a lot of stuff in the Vietnam part that I just love. That was so good.
The ping pong stuff.
Oh, yeah, the ping pong stuff. And just how, like, watching it as an adult is so much better than watching as a child. As a child, you just love the characters and the story. But as an adult, you just see him placed in all these, like, historical moments just randomly. And it's great. It's great because you get it, right? But, no, that's another one that's right up there. And I mean, like, Mrs. Doubtfire... Like, come on, man. I'm still going to go with Jurassic Park, but I'm just saying it's not like the end-all and be-all of 90s movies. There were so many really, really, really good ones.
If we had more time, I would have gone year by year for you, but I feel like I'm also really optimistic that the 20 years, 20 movies will go past the 20 years and we'll get to do 90s.
Yeah, we'll get into the 90s, man. Then we'll really be rolling.
Because I think narrowing it down by year is going to be a lot easier than, like, the best movie of the decade is.
Yeah, that's a hard one. But I guess... and if I say Jurassic Park now and then that year, I'll be like, it's not Jurassic Park. Best of the decade, not necessarily the year. Okay.
I was thinking the exact same thing. Because I'm like, what if we do...
It's like if I answer this now and then I change it later, I'll be like, oops. But no. I'm going to go with Jurassic Park. It's classic. I've been watching it since I was a little boy. And I just...
You know, at the risk of causing an uproar, I'm going to say, you know what the most overrated 90s movie is?
What?
Titanic.
God, I hate Titanic.
I've
actually,
you know,
okay.
I've never actually watched it from beginning to end. I've seen it all, but in clips over like the last 20, well, I guess not 28 years. Whenever it came out to now, I've just seen it in clips, but I've seen it all, and honestly,
97.
I don't.
So just over 20 years, yeah.
I don't get the hype. I understand like special effects and stuff, but it's the Avatar thing all over again. It's like, but I understood the hype of Avatar a lot more than Titanic.
Yeah, and it was a well-made movie. It was just I haven't watched it as an adult, so I can't say that. I haven't watched it from beginning to end since I was a kid. And honestly, as an adult, I don't want to. That's a lot of time. That's a lot of time.
I could watch two other movies.
I remember when I watched it when it first came out when I was a kid because I watched it downstairs like with like my cousins, and it was on 2 VHSs, man. I'd never seen a movie that you had to change the videotape. Kids are like, what the hell's a VHS? You know what I mean? But you had to change the videotape halfway through the movie. And honestly, the first half of the movie, I was bored out of my freaking mind. And I'm a kid who watched Forrest Gump. You know what I mean? Like, and Forrest Gump's great. Not necessarily should be entertaining for kids, but I loved it. Yeah. But this movie, I remember just the first half not digging. Second half was great. I just wanted to watch the ship sink. And that didn't disappoint at all. Those were great moments. The second half of Titanic, amazing. Loved it. Before that, though, not interested in the class socialism stuff. Social class separation thing. I just want to see the ship sink. The dude that the moment I always remember is that dude who falls off and like pings off the propeller when it's like up in the air. It's like ping. Like I always will remember that. Like That's stuck in my brain. That was seared. But yeah, no, I think that's an overhyped movie.
Someone edited a Michael Bay cut of Titanic. Have you seen
No,
that?
no, I haven't seen that.
So it's basically
Oh,
it's
man.
Titanic, but it's a bunch of explosions and like the guy falls into the ocean and he
Yeah.
explodes. It's just great. Just
Oh, that's
but like man,
no,
like,
I
it's,
agree
it's
with you.
funny,
I agree
though.
with you. That's kind of overhyped. But
But
there's
on
a
the
lot
flip
of
side of
movies
that,
in the 90s, man.
the funny thing about that is we're like, man, that's really overhyped. And, like it's too long and all this stuff. But like both of us are like, but you want to watch Lord of the Rings? Yeah, let's watch Lord of
Yeah,
the Rings.
exactly. Yeah, 100%. 100%. Yeah, let's
I think
expanded
that-
editions.
The only additions.
I'll
But I
watch
think that-
Endgame for 3 hours. I don't want to watch Titanic for whatever it was. Like, you know?
Well, I guess maybe it's not really our type of movie. Like that could be it. Maybe like it's
Yeah,
just
it could
not
be
our
that,
genre.
yeah.
But
And
like, it just-
again, I haven't watched it as an adult, and I don't know if I really want to. So I just
like, I know, right? Because it just
yeah. And I might
feel like-
appreciate it more now as an adult, like understanding the different social classes, right? And like what the conflict was there. And I might like enjoy it actually more, but I just haven't found the will to go back and watch it yet. But
But I mean, like, as an adult, I tried watching Gone with the Wind, and I had to turn that off in the first, like, couple. Like, I think I didn't even make it an hour in. I just got
you're just
bored.
like, I'm done.
this
I'm
is-
out.
And that one's 4 hours long.
Yeah.
Why?
You're like,
Why?
forget it.
I don't need. Like, I think
Why? Yeah,
I want to say like all the
I hear you.
iconic things I've like, and it's a beautiful film. It looks great, but like, oh my goodness, like I wasn't paying attention to the story, and I'm just like, not into it, man. I don't know.
Yeah.
But again, maybe it's just our cup of tea. It's not our cup of tea. It's just like we have our specific preferences.
Yeah, maybe it just doesn't fit in there. But yeah,
But-
no. I mean, 90s, man, great movies. Hard to pick out just one.
And I think
Difficult. It's
a
difficult.
lot of people don't take the 90s seriously for a couple, like, because of the campiness, but also because 90s kids may or may not have ruined it by saying, oh, it's always the best and all that kind of stuff. But like there's a lot of really good stuff, and I
There's
think
really good stuff in there.
I've
Goodfellas
enjoyed.
came out that year,
Yep.
that decade, not year. Yeah,
But I've really enjoyed revisiting the 90s with you, even just for a little
it's
bit.
been
I think
fun.
it's been a
It's
good
been a
palate
nice change
cleanser.
of pace. Nice change of pace.
Exactly. It's a bit rambly at times, but I don't mind. I think I've had fun. So what's on your agenda this week, Matt? What are you looking at for watching?
I'm gonna continue watching Vikings. I have over the last 2 weeks pretty much watched a season a week, man. I like once I got in there, I was like, I can't stop. It's such
Yep.
an interesting show. And it's so good. Like the beginning I found a little bit slow, but once you keep going and as the seasons go, obviously it just keeps getting
ramping
better
up. Yeah.
and more interesting. And they cover that show moves so quickly, like through time. Like it doesn't like stick around in a certain time for period. Like it moves very quickly as you see like people grow up. Like within from episode 1 to like not even middle of season 2. Like he has a kid who's a boy and he's like maybe like 12 or something. By the time you're in the middle of season 2, the kid's like 18, 19, like grown ass man. You know what I mean? Like so it
Okay.
doesn't take like it moves very quickly. Like as far as time period goes, like it's not like okay, this season is this time period and this one's this one. Like it moves along quick, which is good. It's good. But yeah, just the characters are really interesting. Like the culture is really interesting. There are some weird episodes where you're like, God damn, that would be uncomfortable.
This is
very,
okay.
very strange. But yeah, no, I'm loving it so far. So I'm just gonna continue watching Vikings.
Cool.
That's what's going on this week. What about you, bud?
Well, I started watching Last Airbender last night. Like starting isn't like I've watched it like probably about 4 or 5 times now in a week. I got a Blu-ray
Yeah.
set, so I'm watching it on Blu-ray. And just kind of, it's one I've seen before, and it's a good show. But also, I, upon recommendation, started watching The Tiger King.
Okay,
And
yeah.
let's just
Okay,
say,
yeah.
coupling, going between The Tiger King and then what's happening in the real world, none of it's great. It just everything just makes me really upset, and it's like, wow, everything's awful. Cool.
It's always
Okay.
a good, yeah.
so I've been trying to balance that with some other things. Me and my roommate have kind of taken a bit of a break from our marathon, Spielberg John Carpenter marathon. We probably should get back into that because I think what I need right now is a tiny bit of.
You should watch Iron Giant, man.
Maybe, yeah, it wouldn't be a bad idea.
That's a feel good. Better. That's a feel good movie, yeah.
Like it's one of those things of I think I picked the wrong time to watch a show about terrible people.
Like, I would say, because I would say,
and it's like watching a what's the saying, a train wreck, where you can't look away because it's like this is
a car accident,
yeah. It's like I can't stop watching, but I want to, but at the same time I want to just get it done with so I can be like I've seen it, it's good. But that's honestly though where Last Airbender like has really been kind of a good palate cleanser for that, because it's have you watched Last Airbender before or no?
No.
I think you'd like it. I think you would really enjoy it because you like animation, and it's a really solid show beginning to end. I think
I've seen a lot of people talk about it. I'm like,
well, check it out. There's a new resurgence because it just showed up on Netflix for I think the States, because I want to say it's been on Netflix up here for a while, but there's become like a new resurgence of a bunch of people loving it, and like there was a brief thing where some people were like, people jumping on the bandwagon, but like, no man, it's one that as an Avatar fan you want as many people to see as possible. It's so good. Like it's really worth it, and it's got one of the best. It's a really good mix of serialized, but also being like episodic, like where it's like not every episode ties together, but because there's an overarching story, it totally all ties together. Like it
works.
Yeah, man, it's
cool.
When you finish Vikings, you should watch Last Airbender because
I'll put it on the list.
Not the movie, but the show. The movie can stop existing. Yeah,
that's usually how it goes. Yeah, that's usually how it goes.
No, but I've really enjoyed today. It's been kind of laid back, kind of not as structured. Nice, man. It's been fun. It's
like you said, with everything going on right now and stuff in the world, and I mean, I know we don't want to get into all that because then I'll rant for another 2 hours and whatnot. But it's good just to have some moments of nostalgia, think back on like childhood and just some of the things that bring us joy, right? When we think about them. Instantaneous joy, and that's what talk about movies is great, man. Yeah.
I think even for me and you too, just having this time for us to, connect and talk and like share our appreciation, not just of movies, but of each other. I think that's an important thing to go on right now. And just like, I know we're only 6 episodes in, man, but like these podcasts have been like the highlight of like my weeks. I know it's the same.
I hear that, man. I hear that.
Gonna end on a mushy note.
Yeah, man. Don't make me cry. Get some Kleenex.
He actually has Kleenex, folks. Wow, he's really crying. He's actually like, no, Matt, don't get your tears on your microphone. You're gonna electrocute yourself.
Death by tears.
Oh no. Sounds like an emo album right there. Like
it does.
Pop punk emo band.
If I see anyone use that, I'm coming after you.
Copyrighted.
TM.
Exactly. There you go. All right, so that has been another episode of Feast of Films. I feel content. I don't feel stuffed today, but I feel like it's been those nice meals where you're
delightful.
You're satisfied.
Perfect.
Yeah. And that's where I'm feeling today. I'm feeling good. Hope you're feeling good. I hope everyone listening is feeling good.
Keep on shooting for the stars, man. Believe you can fly, people. Believe you can fly.
So I'm Ethan R. Hill.
I'm Matt Black.
And we will see you all next week.
Bye-bye.
Toodaloo.
That's my line!
But you took my line. I always say bye-bye. Or wait, no. How does it go?
Oh, I can't remember. I don't know. So I thought I said like bye-bye, and you're like,
so
see ya.
long? Yeah, no. So it's bye-bye. So say your thing.
Bye-bye.
So long.
Toodaloo.
And may the force be with you. Because I didn't say it last week.
I believe I can touch the sky.
Think about it every night and day.
I believe I can fly.
I spread my wings and fly away.
Fly.
I believe I can soar.